Monday, June 19th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight, we discuss switching to Mac and GarageBand. Let's do this!
Well, we're back from yet another con weekend.
Oh, and what a one-day con it was, at least for us.
Yeah, it was weird, though, going to a con where we're not staff, or we're not panelists, or we were nothing special. We were just a bunch of guys.
Yeah, it's like I could tell that it was a good con and there was lots of happening stuff. Not maybe what I expected to be happening, but good stuff. But for us personally, since we didn't know anyone there, it was kind of weird at times, trying to look for something to do.
Yeah, I mean, usually when I go to a con, I'm either hanging around being security, or I'm hanging around with my giant crew making fun of punk kids or something. But here, it was just us and Katsu.
Yep, well, we'll talk about that more on Wednesday.
Yeah, when we actually cover it.
Yep. Well, we notice there's a lot of new listeners, so all this week we're going to do a 30-second little tiny bit at the beginning of the show to help all the new listeners out. Hello, New listeners.
We figure most of you are from all the conventions we've been to lately.
Yep.
At least that's our guess. If anyone's here for some other weird reason, let us know.
Yeah, let us know how you got here. Well, first off, I'm Scott.
And I'm Rym.
So don't get confused with who is who.
Yeah, we had a listener once who was like, Rym, stop being so mean to Scott, which was kind of weird because usually it's the other way around.
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Second of all, we do 4 shows a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday is Science and Technology, that's today. Tuesday night is games of all sorts. Wednesday is anime, manga, and comics. And Thursday is crazy.
Yeah, usually us yelling about things, ranting about things, raving sometimes.
Yep, so if you are downloading the show manually and are not yet into the hip, cool podcasting subscription scene, we have 5 different feeds. One feed will get you every single episode we do. And there are separate feeds for each day, because a lot of people only want to listen to Tuesday or only want to listen to Thursday.
Yeah, your best bet is either look for them, whatever pod-catching thing you use or podcast directory, or just go to our website. They're all listed.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you a tutorial on how to do this because you can just search on Google for podcasting how-tos, and it will tell you everything you need to know. iTunes is probably the easiest way. And,
of course, if you go to the website, we have forums, we have a Frapper map.
Yep, so go to www.frontrowcrew.com, and all our cool stuffs are there for you to do.
Also, our archive of, 130 episodes or so.
Something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but make sure, especially the forums, and email us, geeknights@frontrowcrew.com, and for feedback, so that, you can tell us stuff, and then we might talk about it on the show, or... I responded to almost every email we get because we don't get too many yet.
And speaking of feedback, let us know how the audio sounds, especially today and in the coming few days, because for those of you who do frequent the forums, I bought a Mac Mini.
And that's what we're going to talk about today, so hold off.
Yep, but I'll say right now that we're currently using GarageBand for the first time to record a podcast, as opposed to our previous Linux box running Resound, Audacity, Lame, and ID3V2.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot to say about that.
Well, we'll say that all soon.
Yep.
First, I want to talk about something that happened recently in the forum that not everyone might be aware of.
Yep, which I find this kind of hilarious.
I find it also hilarious. So apparently, let's start at the beginning. There's a guy named Thade who has a podcast that I was on once, and he's in our forum, and he likes our show.
Yep.
His show's okay. Haha. Lol.
Elmo.
Elmo. And he posted a thing in our forum saying, "This other podcast is number 1 on Libsyn, and you're better than them. What the hell?"
Now, part of that is that we've, until just now, never advertised Geeknights.
Never.
We've spread only through word of mouth, and we're gearing up over these next many weeks toward Otakon, which is our, I guess, big coming out. That's going to be our huge, crazy live show in Baltimore, Maryland, at the biggest anime con.
We're going to do some real big promotion real soon, so we're going to get, hopefully, a crap ton of listeners coming in.
Even though we see y'all kind of trickling in now.
Yep. So that means it must be working.
But anyway, a lot of our current listeners are always yelling at us to get more listeners, or why don't you advertise, and how come people don't talk about you everywhere?
I wonder. But the point is that that other podcast is called The Moon Masters, which I listened to one episode, well, part of an episode, and it's just two guys talking about nothing. Like, we're two guys talking about stuff, geeky stuff. They're two guys talking about nothing.
So it's about the Seinfeld of podcasting?
I guess. I don't even know.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it. I have no opinion either way.
Yep, and basically, they got to number one on Libsyn by cheating, and they freely admit this. They did some sort of FARC image thing.
It's a good way to cheat. I really give them props.
Yep.
I looked at what they did, and that was clever.
Yep, and Libsyn found out and stopped them and whatever. So, first of all, they didn't even beat us on, well, they might. We have no idea where we are on Libsyn.
Yeah.
We're probably way down low because we don't use all that Libsyn stuff.
Yeah, Libsyn's always yelling at me to, hey, update your RSS blah, 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 but we don't use any of their features except their file storage.
Yep.
And we never plan to.
No, we don't. So apparently, like, someone on our forum was on their forum also and pointed to the thing where the Thade guy said that we were better.
And then their forum exploded.
And their forum exploded a little tiny. It wasn't a big explosion. It was a little tiny explosion.
It was a podcastosphere explosion.
Yeah, and then I went over there and I was like, I never listened to your show. And, well, I listen to it now, but at the time I hadn't listened to the show. And I'm like, we don't necessarily hate you, whatever. Then they're like, yeah, we suck. So they admitted that their podcast sucks. And then they were like, we should have a war. Yeah. I'm like, all right.
I guess we'll fire an opening salvo. You suck.
The Moon Masters is the worst podcast this side of the universe. It's two schmucks with bad audio quality.
I heard. I can't say where I heard this. It might just be a rumor, but I heard that the two Moon Masters can't get it up. And that they killed their parents.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard that since they live on the West Coast, everything is smaller over there.
Okay. I feel like Shock Jock Radio right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do some news action.
Yeah. All right. So actually, we've been talking not really as news, but just as asides very often about HD, DVD, and Blu-ray. And anyone who's listened for a while knows our opinions on those two bits of technology. But very recently, Blu-ray finally debuted in the point that now there are players available and people have watched Blu-ray movies.
Holy crap.
And the general response was underwhelming.
Well, the response to HD DVD was, hey, they basically gave me a Linux computer. It has a DVD-ROM which plays these things. It takes forever to start up and forever to load, but once it does, you get a really good-looking movie. So what is the Blu-ray response? Similar?
It really, really depended. I mean, there were a lot of the reviewers saying things like there was a lot of artifacting if you zoomed in or looked at some of the movies, and they were really unimpressed with some of them. However, I point out that one of the movies was The Fifth Element, which is a pretty old movie.
Yeah, but according to some other podcasts I listened to this morning, The Fifth Element is the big movie for like testing out an HD TV and all that, kind of video stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know that, so.
I didn't know it either. I don't even know if it's true. It's hearsay.
But apparently, at least one reviewer said that the best movie in terms of quality was 50 First Dates, which is that Adam Sandler movie. I never saw it.
What does that movie have to gain by being in HD?
I really don't know. I mean, to me, the only things that gain from being HD are high production value, awesome movies.
Yeah, movies, like The Lord of the Rings has something to gain in HD. There's a website that has screenshots of the difference between the HD Lord of the Rings and like the film and the regular VHS or regular DVD, and it's astonishing the difference.
Even though, I'll point out that website is a little deceptive because when you show a still frame, yes, the difference is incredibly obvious. But when it's moving, it's actually very difficult to tell.
It is.
However, the difference is still there. And I guess I should say real quickly that high definition is awesome. And I always want technology, especially display technology, to get better and better and better. My issue is not that this technology is not good, because I want things to get better. My issue is that HD DVD and Blu-ray are DRM-encumbered evil crap that exists solely to milk money out of consumers who don't know better.
It's like, everyone's bought the latest and greatest technology, right? Everyone's bought a DVD player, So as soon as, there's $20 DVD players out there. If they want to make more money, if you're in a DVD player making business, you're not going to make enough money just on selling replacements for broken DVD players. You need to come out with something new. So you just call it, put the HD on front of it, and now you sell everyone in the world a new player. That's how it works.
Plus, I mean, the whole format war, there was no reason to have Blu-ray and HD DVD. It was just pride and money grubbing on both sides of that fence.
I don't really understand why people
It wasn't people, it's Sony. Because Sony is
it's everyone else. There's like two teams. Sony's the head of one team.
Yeah, but Sony's team always loses.
Yeah, the thing I don't understand is why even have a format war? Sure, you can do evil license fees and stuff, but if you really want to make money, just everyone standardize in an open format and then make a better player than anyone else. If you're fighting to make a closed format and then have that be the standard so that you can get control of the market as opposed to someone else, that tells me that you make shit players and you don't have confidence in the quality of the hardware you make to beat out everyone else. If there was just one standard, like, you know, if HD DVD was it and that was the only thing and everyone did it, then if you're fighting against it, you're telling me that you don't think you can make a better player than everyone else.
Unless the fight had nothing to do with any of that, and the fight was purely my format is technologically superior. Look at this. But it's never been that way.
Nope, it's never been. Well, it's been that way a little bit, but it's never been such a difference to matter.
And it seems really that Sony is always the instigator here. I mean, every time there's some sort of format, Sony always tries to make a proprietary crap one. And even though it's really good, they encumber it and they cripple it and they don't want other people to use it. And then everyone else standardizes on something else and Sony loses. But they don't learn their lesson and they keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. 8-track 3, anyone?
Mini disc.
Well, mini disc, is different story slightly.
Yeah, but it still ended up, it's pretty much dead in the U.S.
Yep. All right, so Craigslist, the amazing site for classified type ads of all sorts. I've always had one problem with it, and that's if you don't live in a super major city area, it's sometimes hard to, get on Craigslist for any useful purpose. I mean, even where we live, I had to go to click on New York City, and then I had to click on Westchester, and then type in Beacon, and that's not even this county. That's like a county away is the closest I could get on Craigslist.
Yep. When I was looking for jobs way back, I found anything I found that was anywhere near the Mid-Hudson Valley. I just looked in the New York City category, and they were just all over the place randomly in there.
Yep. Craigslist has upgraded now, and they have added a shit ton of stuff. They've got like other countries on there, and they've added a whole bunch of cities. And I'm going to link to a bunch of cities they added. In New York, they've added Binghamton, New York, Long Island. There wasn't a Long Island. If you lived in Long Island, you really couldn't use Craigslist.
I guess Long Island is just New York City.
Yeah, and there's a Utica now, and there's a Hudson Valley, which is us. We have our own Craigslist now, and it's really cool because it's super empty.
You know what we got to do?
There's like 7 personals ads in there.
I realize right now what we need to do is put Moz in there.
I know. I was going to put Moz in there when I make the announcement that there's a meeting this Saturday.
Yes, and promote the hell out of it because I want to play some goddamn board games.
Yep, that's what I'm going to do. But so for anyone out there, who maybe didn't know about Craigslist as the ultimate classified ads of the universe, or anyone out there who didn't use Craigslist because it wasn't supporting your geographic location, it might support your geographic location now. So go check it out.
And in fact, I'll note to any of you out there who may be looking for jobs in any technological field involving computers, Craigslist is pretty much the best place to get jobs.
I got my job through Craigslist. I posted my resume. A guy emailed me. I'm working there now.
While I didn't get any of the jobs I've ever had through Craigslist, I've gotten countless offers directly as a result of Craigslist. In fact, I'm still getting offers now that I already have a job that I'm not quitting anytime soon.
Yep, and also there is a section on Craigslist where you can supposedly get laid. I've never used it, but it's amusing to look at.
Have you looked at it?
I looked at it once a long time ago because someone linked to it. Apparently, it's just people saying things like, I'm a dude, I live in this area, I'm this old, I want a girl to come suck my dick in the morning.
Wow, great.
And then I don't know if it works.
I wonder how close... I wonder how much of that edges toward prostitution.
I think it's consenting, non-paying adult encounter. I think it's called the casual encounters section.
Oh, yeah, but I just have this feeling that regardless of what actually is going on, because it's generally my opinion that any number of consenting adults can do whatever they want to each other.
I agree.
But I see the government, particularly certain elements of the government and or busybodies in local communities, once they discover this, coming down like a sack full of hammers.
Well, it's been there for a long time, and I guess Craig has his ass covered because no one's done anything about it. You have to be like over 18 to go in and even look at it.
I just think the Luddites don't know about it yet.
Maybe.
Quite frankly, because I have a feeling that if this was well known outside of the internet world, that there would be uptight biddies with their panties in a knot over it.
I'd imagine so, but hey, maybe I'll go search to see if anything happened about it in the past.
All right, that music, for all of our new listeners, means it's time for Thing of the Day.
Or Things of the Day.
Well, my Thing of the Day, and then your Thing of the Day.
Well, each day of the podcast, we each talk about a thing that we found somewhere, usually on the internet, that is very amusing or interesting.
I believe the official language we used when we came up with it was the most interesting thing we've seen on the internet in the last 24 hours.
Well, some of these aren't from the last 24 hours. I remember we did a few retro things of the day.
Shh.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, if you go to our website, frontrowcrew.com, you can click the links to see the things of the day for yourself.
Yep. Even though not that many of you seem to follow the links, and I've discovered from talking to people that most people for my links just look in my Delicious and see what I've linked to lately.
Yeah, Delicious users, if you look at our Deliciouses, then you will see the things that we Deliciouses, and then you will know the things of the day beforehand, most likely.
Anyway, my Thing of the Day is a video that I found just now. It's been on the internet for a while, but it doesn't seem to have hit all the big sites yet, so I'm ahead of the curve here. It's a nice example of something that's called the ground effect, which I'm not going to try to explain in 30 seconds, but suffice to say, it's a cool video of a guy jumping out of a helicopter at the top of a mountain without deploying his parachute for a long time, not dying.
Yeah, he pretty much flies 15 or so feet above the snow for a good long distance.
I mean, I've seen videos of the ground effect, like little videos of like a little paper airplane doing something or things people have made. This is the most amazing ground effects video I've ever seen.
Even more amazing than the ground effects cars.
Yeah, and the ground effects cars are pretty badass.
Ground effects cars are insane. It's basically this wicked fast car that's suction cupped to the ground via ground effects aerodynamic stuff. And it can just turn on a dime while going full speed. But if anything disrupts the car, it goes flying and kills the driver.
And anyone nearby.
That's why they don't use them anymore. But it's basically the fastest, awesomest car.
Yeah. So if you're ever bored, other than watching the video, just Google around for ground effect and read all that physics.
That's an EFFECT, not
yes.
AFFECT.
Mr. Period will come down on you.
That's right. My thing of the day is a nice little Photoshop contest on Worth 1000 called Real Life Merit Badges 3. I assume there must be a Real Life Merit Badges 1 and 2, but I've never seen them. This really stands out because there's some good merit badges in here, like the iPod listening merit badge, the toast making merit badge, which is ridiculously cute.
Yeah.
The Photoshop merit badge. And it seems to be everyone's favorite that keeps showing up all over the internet is this guy made the Tetris merit badge, which is way cool. I
got to say it was good. I mean, Worth 1000 seems to be a little bit derided by a lot of the other places where Photoshop contests appear. Mm-hmm. It's much more, I guess, mainstream. A lot of times, real news sites will link to it.
Yeah, but it seems to me that Worth 1000, unlike FARC, which is mostly about the comedy of your Photoshop,
yep.
Worth 1000, it seems to be people priding themselves on not only the cleverness and comedy of their Photoshops, but the quality of their Photoshop skills.
Yes, I mean, it's more heavily moderated and chosen than I'd say Photoshop Fridays are.
Yeah, but these guys will say stuff like, please click and see the uncompressed version of my Photoshop. Compression kills the image quality. And it's like, all right, I don't really care about your Photoshop skills. I just care if it's funny. And this is pretty amusing. So it's worth a look, especially for the Elite Merit Badge. Elite.
But anyway, today, as we said in the beginning, we're going to be talking about me, a longtime Windows and primarily Linux user, who very recently switched to a Mac Mini.
Well, you didn't switch, you got one.
Well, I switched because my Linux box is real old and real slow.
All right, well, let's give some backstory here.
All right, now I'll point out that this is mostly Scott's doing.
All right, then I'll give the backstory.
All right.
So, the backstory is this. Rym has a shitty old computer.
It's over 6 years old.
It's basically worthless, and we use it to do the podcast.
And it works really well. It's just it takes about 10 minutes to encode.
But there were some kinks in the process. It wasn't perfectly smooth, and I was like, you need a new computer. We want to make the podcast operation smoother. Let's do it. And I figured after a long time of thinking, hey, we can get those, look at what Rym does with his computer. He browses the web. He does IM. He does the podcast.
I do mostly audio.
He does a lot of audio. He, he likes to play games, but because the new Intel Macs can boot camp, he can do that.
Yep, it can't. I mean, the Mac Minis can't play Half-Life 2 at all.
No.
But they can play Half-Life.
Well, that's just because you bought the non-dual core.
No, even the dual core really can't.
Well, that's because the video card is poopy in the Mini.
Yeah, I'd have to get a MacBook Pro or something, but that's a whole other...
Well, no, a regular MacBook should do it, or maybe an iMac would do it.
Apparently, even the MacBook Pro gets okay performance.
All right. Anyway, the point is that after thinking about it, I realized, hey, the Mac does everything that Rym needs.
So Q Scott starting a massive, concerted campaign to convince me to buy a Mac. He got the whole forum against me. He calls my girlfriend.
I didn't call her, but she kind of offered her services.
I was attacked from every front to buy a Mac, and I was kind of leaning...
Oh, the other reason was that Rym doesn't have an MP3 player, and now he has a commute in the car.
Yep.
So, the thing is, should he get the iPod or not? And the iPod really only fully works beautifully when combined with iTunes, but it is a beautiful combination when it works.
Yes, it is. I mean, I want to do a separate show just about MP3 players.
iPod plus iTunes?
Yeah.
Because really, if you get a non-iPod MP3 player or use a non-iTunes podcatcher player syncer program, it is not as smooth no matter what you do.
iTunes and iPod are real slick, and despite all of the other things I may say about Apple in these next 40 minutes or so, iTunes and iPod, slick.
Yes, but besides that, because you can do that with Windows, we mostly bought this Mac for the podcasting.
Yep, meaning GarageBand, the integrated sound card, all the fun Mac stuff, the fact that it's real fast. I mean, this thing is many times faster than my current
And it's
computer.
only the Core Solo, right?
It's only the Core Solo, which is still much faster than
Oh, yeah,
my
I guess
current
you
computer.
forgot to say that after much campaigning, Rym went to the store and bought a $600 Mac Mini.
In fact,
And an iPod Nano.
Yes, and a bit to put it in my car. I just drove to White Plains from my work, bought a Mac Mini over lunch, drove back to my work, and then I sat there at my work for the rest of the day doing work with this Mac Mini and an iPod and everything sitting there next to me.
I can't do that on the day when the Wii comes out. I'm not going to work.
So
no chance.
So I sit there and I keep looking at it and fiddling with it. And finally, my boss guy, he's sitting there and he looks and he says, "What's that? Did you go buy a Mac over lunch?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." Let me see. And then everyone came around. I had to open it and show it to everyone, and I didn't do any more work. They were
You know what that tells
impressed.
you? You should just buy something every day.
Yeah, that's a great use of all my credit.
It is. And then you never have to do any work. They just keep paying you to buy new things and showing it to them every day. Come one day, roll an HDTV in there.
Honestly, this is the most non-technical job I've ever had.
Yeah. Anyway, so we got the Mac. And
I bought it, I installed it, I plugged it in, and I was real impressed with it. It's real shiny, it's real simple and quick. The only thing, now remember, this is all from my cursory, the first few days of using it. I mean, I still was doing the podcast in Linux because that was all set up, and I could knock out podcasts without even blinking. I have everything set up so perfectly. So on the Mac, I fiddled with it bit by bit, but I didn't get to fully use it until yesterday. Well, Sunday really. Sunday was and Saturday a bit. I didn't have any time, podcast, work, all the other stuff we do. But my initial impression was great, and everyone I talked to, I told them how wonderful it was, and I loved my little Mac. The only problem I had of everything I did was that Mac mouse drivers are terrible. absolutely terrible. It was almost a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's like I knew that Macs had a mouse problem, but it had slipped my mind, honestly, when I was, like if I would have remembered it, I would have listed it in my list of reasons Rym should get a Mac. I would have put one reason not to get a Mac. Rym will hate the mouse.
Now, the thing is, I'd used a lot of Macs before. I mean, Emily has a Mac, Yuko has a Mac, Nuri has a Mac. Almost a lot of people we know have Macs.
Yep.
And most of them have the Mac mouse, that funny, cool-looking thing with one button.
Yep.
And whenever I use their computers, the mouse always felt really, really crappy, just really not accurate and whooshy.
Yep. See, I didn't realize that you thought it was the actual physical mouse causing the problem.
I thought it was the mouse itself.
I knew that it was the operating system, and I could have told you.
I thought that if I plugged my awesome Logitech mouse in, it would work great.
Nope. I could have told you that.
It was terrible.
I guess you had to find out on your own because I forgot.
So then I thought, Logitech makes OS X drivers. I'll just install it. Logitech's OS X driver doesn't do dick.
Really?
It doesn't. All it does is let you configure the buttons on your mouse. That's it.
I guess that would be handy for my mouse, which has 12 buttons.
Yeah.
But for your mouse, which is a normal 2-button and a click wheel, it doesn't do anything.
I mean, I've set the mouse sensitivity on the Mac as high as it'll go, and it's not even a quarter of what I want it to be.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't realize, we set mouse sensitivities way up.
Like, let me put it this way. In my old Windows box, right? I hacked the registry to set the absolute maximum sensitivity Windows will allow in that numeric field.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what mouse sensitivity is, just in case, you can go into whatever operating system you run. It doesn't matter. You can change your mouse motion speed or sensitivity. If it's less sensitive, that means you have to move the mouse physically very, very far to make the arrow on the screen move very, very far. So you might, if you put a low sensitivity, you might have to move the mouse all the way across your desk, pick it up, and move it all the way across your desk again, just to get the mouse to go across the whole monitor.
I mean, I'm not to exaggerate at all here. When I set up a mouse in my perfect world, and my Linux box is this way, and my Windows box is this way, I never move the mouse outside of a little bit less than an inch in any direction ever.
Yep, with a high sensitivity, you can move the mouse maybe a centimeter, and then it'll jump all the way across the screen.
I mean, I literally only use my thumb and my pinky finger, and I just kind of twitch them back and forth, and that's how I use a mouse. That's why I don't have carpal tunnel.
Somehow I don't think that's the way to avoid carpal tunnel, because I don't have it either.
Yeah, but you also use a very high sensitivity. Not quite that high, but...
Yeah, but, the correct ergonomic way to use a mouse, according to the internet, is not the way you or I use it.
But anyway, to all of you Mac users out there, because the main part of this episode is that I have just switched to Mac, and I have a lot of questions for all of you out there, and I'm really curious as to how you'll answer them. This is the first question, and this is just from my preliminary usage. Is there any way to make the mouse better and more sensitive? Or do you guys even realize how horribly inaccurate your Mac mice are? Or is there a trick you guys know that I don't know to make it work?
Maybe this is why there are no FPSs for the Mac, because as soon as someone tries to make one, they realize, oh shit, the mouse makes it impossible to win. You'll just die.
Yeah. But anyway, now... other than that, everything was great. I mean, I was playing with widgets, and they're really cool, and everything's really pretty, and everything installed really easily, and Firefox was fast, and everything was great.
Yeah, compared to your old computer, everything is terrific. A Firefox that actually plays YouTubes without delay.
Yeah.
Now, sound that plays.
Well, mostly. I'll get to that. But everything just worked. So I told everyone, Macs are great. I'm really happy with this. And I fiddled with GarageBand a little bit, but it wasn't until Sunday when I sat down for 5 hours and tried to do all the real stuff that I do on my computer. I started installing the weird stuff I use. I started actually trying to use GarageBand to make podcasts and audio. I tried using the sequencer. I tried installing codecs and weird things. I tried fiddling with everything. And before I continue, I would like to say right now that this isn't a case of something that a lot of people accuse us of often, of trying something out, looking for anything bad in order to have a reason to not like it, or looking for all the faults. I really, really want to like this Mac. I really, really want to be a Mac user and do this, but I have a lot of issues with OS X and Apple in general, and they have come out in my use of this Mac, and I implore any Mac users out there, if you have any answers or any solutions to all of the things I bring up, I am more than happy to listen. because I have until next Tuesday to return this thing. And as much as it pains me, I am leaning, I'd say about 20% toward just returning it and being done with this.
Yeah, it looks like right now we're either going to return it and get the money back, which actually costs $60.
Yeah, which saves me because for the money
$540.
With $540, I could build a badass PC.
Yep, and use Ubuntu.
Well, actually, I'll probably use Gen 2.
Anyway, or we can delegate it to being the living room PC, and I'll just buy half of it from Ryms so it's fair.
Yep, which actually isn't that bad of an idea because it seems to work really well in that sense.
Yeah, as long as we can get it to play all the video codecs we want it to play, it'll be a good living room PC as opposed to a podcast PC. But it also will have a use, for going on trips because it's small.
Yep, and in trips, doing live shows at conventions.
And when our Apple friends come over, they'll have a way to interface with us.
Yep.
All right. So, I also want to say that a lot of the problems Rym is going to complain about, I didn't know them beforehand.
Yes, to Scott's credit, when he convinced me to buy a Mac, everything he said sounded great, and I had no reason to disagree with him.
Yeah, and many of the things I said I knew for a fact, but a couple of the things I said were based on the widely shared opinion of many Mac users, and I had no reason to disbelieve them. And usually I don't trust other people's opinions. If someone else gives an opinion, I said, I don't care what you think, I'm going to go find out for myself. But I trusted, that everyone was saying, oh, GarageBand is the greatest thing for podcasting, and why wouldn't it be? It's the only software in the universe. Apple pretty much invented podcasting, not technically, that Weiner guy did, but
yeah.
They make all the podcasting stuff. They promote podcasting. They
sell
directory.
Their Macs for podcasting. Watch all their ads. They sell Macs on the fact that, look, you can podcast with this. This is how you podcast.
Yep. So, it was just kind of obvious without actually researching it that GarageBand is the ultimate podcast tool.
Now, I'd like to start with, because I have a lot of things to say, with the one thing that bothers me the most, and it bothers me not so much from a technical standpoint, because there are ways around it. I can deal with it. It bothers me because this isn't the kind of behavior I would expect from Apple. I expect this from Sony. I expect this from Microsoft. But Apple has proven to me that in many ways they're no better, and they're trying to lock you into proprietary crap formats just like everyone else is.
In fact, I would say they're worse. People had always complained about, they'll protest in front of Apple stores about iTunes DRM. And I'm like, yeah, protest that iTunes DRM. I don't buy anything from the iTunes Music Store. And if you go to the iTunes Music Store and buy music, it's DRM'd. And I'm against that, so I don't use the Music Store. And that's what I figured those guys are protesting. And not being a Mac user, I didn't realize it went much farther than that.
So, to start, in GarageBand, you say you make a podcast, you record it, you edit, you're done with it, you're ready to make it into an actual podcast. The only real options GarageBand gives you are to make a podcast, which means it downmixes it to a compressed AAC, which is completely incompatible with almost every MP3 player in the world except iPods.
Yep. How do you make an MP3, Rym?
Well,
a real file.
Well, the answer is you can't.
Oh.
GarageBand, and now you can't even pick what format it makes files in. Basically, it'll look at what kind of tracks you have, and it'll either make an AAC, which is compressed and Apple proprietary, or an AIFF, which is lossless, but also Apple proprietary.
Well, AACs can be played on, MPlayer and all that stuff.
Yeah, but
it's not an open, free format, really.
A lot of MP3 players can't play it.
That's true.
A lot of our listeners wouldn't be able to listen to Geeknights if we used that, especially if we used all that enhanced podcasting blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, pretty much anyone who does do an enhanced podcast with the pictures and the links and all that other fancy stuff.
Which I think could be really cool.
Yep, also releases a separate MP3 podcast. Or else you're basically just saying, if you don't have an iPod and iTunes, you can't listen to my show, sorry.
Yep, in fact, one of our listeners asked us why we didn't do it, and we went on a long rant as to why the AAC podcast format is laughable.
Yep.
But there's really no way to just make an MP3. In fact, you can't even make a WAV file. You can, if you have a podcast track in the top, it'll automatically make an AAC, and you have very few options as to how you want it to make that AAC. It just kind of guesses as to what kind of quality you want. If you get rid of that podcast track, then it'll make an AIFF, which is lossless, but also kind of useless because outside of the Mac world, almost nothing supports that format.
Well, you can play that format, but not a whole lot of software will import that format. Only really proprietary software. I think Audacity can import it now.
Yeah, if you're running it on a Mac.
Yeah. Well, it's,
Well, I guess I'll backtrack.
It's not as good as Wave, because Wave works on anything.
A long time ago, Emily sent me some cool things she'd done in school, some audio files, and she sent them to me as AIFFs. And I had absolutely no way to play them.
Yep.
And I've learned that a lot of Mac users don't realize that the rest of the world uses Wave and MP3, and AIFF is really only a Mac thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you install QuickTime on Windows, then you can play them.
Yeah.
Because that's Mac software. It's QuickTime.
Oh, and going back to the whole QuickTime thing, Macs don't come with QuickTime Pro, so you can't do any of that cool stuff anyway, or converting between things. You have to pay for that extra.
Yeah, well, it's on a Windows computer or Linux computer. They're free programs that let you pretty much convert any file format in the universe. In Macs, there's QuickTime, and QuickTime does all your encodings and decodings and all that jazz. But to do super encodings and decodings of everything, you have to pay for QuickTime Pro or pirate it.
Now, anyway, I simplified a little, and I want to expand onto just how much this pisses me off. Now, I said I could get AIFFs, the lossless ones, out of there. You can't do that directly. You can't just export to an AIFF on the disk. If you export to the disk, it makes an AAC. There is no way around that I can find. The only way I've been able to get AIFFs out of GarageBand is to send the podcast I just made to iTunes. Once it's in iTunes, I then close iTunes, go to the iTunes music directory, and hidden in there is the AIFF that I then have to run a special application on to turn it into a WAV so that I can then convert it into an MP3 and then use something, and then I'll reopen it in iTunes, add the ID3 stuff, and then upload it to Libsyn.
It seems to me like Apple, the software, really just tries to hide from you the fact that files even exist.
And is trying to force me to use the Apple proprietary stuff, and at every step of the way, they do everything they can to discourage you from using MP3s.
It's like they don't want you to realize that there's actually a folder full of MP3 files and AAC files somewhere. They just want you to look in iTunes at your list of artists and albums and click on that and never actually know what's, going on, which is great if you're just like my mom, who doesn't, can't manage a directory full of files. But if you're a geek, you want to manage a directory full of files. And if someone, it's okay if someone tries to not show it to you or makes it so you don't have to look there. But to make it more difficult for you to do it when you want to, or to conceal it, or to put roadblocks in your way when you want to do something the real way is like, grrr.
It's the worst thing is that the reason I wanted to switch to a Mac is to make everything seamless. Because in Linux, to make my podcast, I recorded in one program, exported it to a WAV, opened it in another program, did stuff to it, saved it, ran a command line scripty that did all the rest of my stuff and uploaded it. And Apple really sells their Macs on you can just podcast. It just works. You know what?
It does if you do it Apple's way.
Meaning Apple's proprietary formats, meaning at least half the people out there can't listen to your podcast.
Most of the people out there can't listen to your podcast.
Yeah. So I have to do all these hackish things, the kind of things I expect to have to do in Linux to make things work.
Only worse. I mean, on Linux, if you just want to run lame, you get lame and you run it. Here, you have to go get this iTunes lame thing, and it doesn't work quite right, and you have to do stuff to it. And
yeah, keep in mind that iTunes has a convert to MP3 thing, right? One, it converts terribly. It makes poor quality MP3s. The internet has verified this for me. I wasn't just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you can't pick what kind of MP3s it makes. It just picks a format.
Yeah, it's like we want to make 96 kilobit per second mono MP3s. It doesn't let you choose. It just makes an MP3.
Now, a lot of you are going to say, yeah, you can choose in the import section. You're wrong. You can choose in the import section if you're ripping CDs. If you're converting files that are in the iTunes library to MP3, that setting does nothing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I have to do all these hacks to get an MP3. It takes longer for me to do the podcast than it does in Linux because I have to do all this extra stuff. All right, fine. But theoretically, The interface of GarageBand and the awesome that is GarageBand should more than make up for that. I mean, GarageBand has all that special stuff in it. I submit to you that GarageBand's interface is terrible. I've been using it for many hours. In fact, I've been using it for a couple days now, trying to learn it, trying to use it, trying to make it do what I want to do. And over time, I've figured out how to make it do things, but everything's just so counterintuitive and completely different from all the normal audio editing programs I've used in my entire life.
Well, I think part of it is that GarageBand is made for music composition and sequencing. It's really not what you want for a podcast.
Yes, it is. They bill it as a podcast program.
They do. But for podcasting, what you really want is a wave editor because you're dealing with a lot of waves.
Yep. Well, in fact, I could do a whole thing, and we should probably do a show on this, but to do a podcast, you need a wave editor and a sequencer. You basically need these two things to do your podcast. And GarageBand is an okay sequencer mixed with an absolutely, I'm sorry to say this, piss-poor wave editor.
It's not just piss poor, it's worse than Audacity, which is free.
Even after practicing and practicing, I can whip together and edit a podcast in about an eighth the time on Linux than it takes me to do it. In fact, I still can't do it effectively in GarageBand. In like a simple thing, say I have a huge, hour-long MP3, and Scott has a cold, let's say, or I have a cold, and I coughed a bunch of times, like 10 times throughout the podcast. In Linux, while I'm recording, anytime something happens that I'm going to have to edit out later, because we really don't edit much, and in fact, the show we're doing right now, we're not going to edit at all.
Because it's too much of a pain in the ass in GarageBand.
It's so hard to edit things in GarageBand. See, a lot of podcasters have come to us and said, how the hell do you do 4 episodes a night, an hour long? That's just crazy.
And now I'm beginning to realize, and also a lot of other podcasts seem to play music like as they record, as if they were doing a real radio show where you have to, do things in real time. And we tend to do everything in post-production. We add our music in later. We add all the, we don't play the music while we're talking. But other podcasts seem to do that. And now I realize why. Because they're using GarageBand and we're not.
And editing things in GarageBand is just this tedious process. I have to click like twice as many times to make anything happen. And the worst thing about it is that everything's contextual. So the context of what I'm doing will change, but I won't notice it. And suddenly something doesn't work. Like, if you click in a certain area of the screen, now this one thing won't work. But if you click in this other area, now it works, because you're not supposed to use that thing if you're in one context, but you're supposed to use another context. Or if you drag a file into the loop thing, it'll make a loop, unless you're in this context, and then it doesn't make a loop. Or if the file you want to make the loop out of, this is the thing that really got me just now. There's a limit to how big a loop can be. So if you try to make a loop out of a file bigger than that limit, it just doesn't work. It doesn't give you an error. It doesn't say, hey, this is too long. It doesn't do anything. It just doesn't work and doesn't tell you why.
I saw him. He dragged the loop into this area. I read the documentation. It said, if you want to add a new loop, drag the file into this area. He dragged it into that area. It turned into an X and floated back to where it came from. It didn't tell you shit. It's trying to make it so easy for idiots who will be scared of an error message. With Apple's interface guidelines, don't make error messages show up because they scare stupid users, that it makes it impossible for someone who knows what they're doing to figure out what the fuck is going wrong. It just frustrates the hell out of you and you want to destroy everyone.
You know what I did? I sat there dragging different waves because I had this whole directory of wave files from all the, sound effects from the podcast from before in the Linux box that I copied over. And some would work and some wouldn't. And over the course of experimentation, I figured out that, it just won't accept files that are longer than X.
Huh?
I shouldn't have to do that. It should just tell me, or there should be a document or something.
Yeah, and even if I tried searching on Google and Apple's website,
oh my God.
All it says there is, if you want to add a loop, drag it into the thing. That's the only documentation you can get is the stuff for idiots. There's no specific, they've set all these defaults all over the place because there's a school of user interface design, which is actually pretty smart, that says, in any part of your application, you can choose between giving the user an option or setting an intelligent default. And it's usually better to set an intelligent default because it's more user-friendly. It takes power away from the user, but it makes everything easier. And if your default is intelligent, it won't matter. A good example is, I can't think of
what? Lame. a lot of lame implementations, by default, will just make a good MP3.
Yep, there you go. If you type lame space and then the MP3, by default, it makes a pretty good MP3.
You can do stuff to make it better. You could do stuff to make it worse. But by default, it makes a good one.
Apple seems to say, we're not going to allow you to make it better or worse. We're just going to give you the intelligent default, which would be fine.
Well,
but nowhere does it tell you what the intelligent defaults are. You can't figure this shit out. There's no detailed documentation. It's all idiot documentation. It's worse than a dummy's book.
I mean, literally, I really hate to sound so down on Apple, but I ran into trouble. Like, a thing wouldn't work. So I'd go to Apple's website and look for some documentation because there's no good documentation built into the computer. And every piece of documentation I find on all of Apple's sites basically just says, oh, just do this and it works. Or just hit export. Oh, it's just so easy.
But I want to do something more advanced than that. I don't want to just drag it in. I want to drag it in and set a bunch of options. Oh, they don't exist. Oh, that can't be done. Oh.
Or they do exist, but not in the program you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part is, then I thought, all right, I'll ask those cool Mac people. So I went into the Apple Talk forums. And I saw people asking the same questions I was asking, and they were getting hostile answers. People were giving them like, why would you want to do that? Or, oh, obviously do this. Or one guy was like, I can't do what I want to do. I'm going to return my Mac. Can anyone convince me not to? And the responses were like, just return your Mac. We don't want to deal with you.
Yeah, people say that, Mac users are all friendly, cool, hip kids, and Linux users are all these crazy zealots, and Windows users are just boring business guys. No, nowadays, the Mac users are the crazy zealots with the proprietary closed software. The Linux people are the friendly, happy, geeky, cool people, and the Windows people is everyone else.
I mean, I guess I don't want to go too much longer. This has already been a long show, but I can't do things that I want to do in GarageBand that I could do easily with open source free software in Linux.
Yep. Now, here's the thing is that we did find a lot of ways to do these things on Apple with either A, buying software, B, pirating the same software, or C, installing some open source software. But if we're going to do those things, why are we buying the Apple? We're buying the Apple for the Apple software. If we're going to use open source software, I might as well get a cheap PC and run Ubuntu to use that open source software that can do the things we need. If I'm buying the Apple, it's for the Apple software, and if the Apple software doesn't cut it, why are we paying for it?
Now, to its credit, GarageBand seems to do a few things very well. By default, it sets up some filters for our voices that seem to be pretty cool, even though it's not entirely easy to tell exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like if you talk into it and play it back, it sounds good like a radio guy. Someone must have set up a cool filter. But it doesn't tell you exactly what that filter is doing frequency-wise.
Now, I found out ways to find out what it's doing, and I've been poking around a bit, and it seems pretty good. But there's no easy interface to change this stuff. Well, there's no good interface. Like, for an example, they have a compressor, and all it is a slider from 0 to 100. How much do you want to compress this? I have a real hardware compressor sitting in front of me right now that we put this show through.
What is that, 5 dials?
It has, well, on a real compressor, I can set the ratio of compression, the attack speed, the decay speed. I can set what kind of curve I want on the compressor. There's all these sorts of options that mean a lot, and I know a lot about this stuff, and I know how to set these things to make things sound good or bad. And in GarageBand, it just gives you a slider from 0 to 100. I don't know what that slider does. I assume they just made a default compressor and...
Yeah, I mean, an audio professional wouldn't know what to do with it because... And an idiot wouldn't know what to do with it either. What's the point?
But anyway, GarageBand is good at recording a live podcast, as in we're in front of people, we are going to record from start to finish and then export. Not counting the fact that exporting doesn't work unless you use all these hacks.
Yep, and it does seem to be pretty good at music. Like if you're a musician or you want to do MIDI.
Well, I thought that. I'm not going to get into it now. I don't want to talk forever about this, but I was not at all impressed with the way GarageBand handles MIDI and music.
Because that's what it seems to be. Like, if I look through the documentation, the podcasting part is such a small portion, and most of it is music, plug your instruments into it, all these tracks, blah, blah, blah.
The way it is now is podcasting seems to be the primary focus of the program. Mm-hmm. But the music is there, and a lot of people have told me all the cool things that it can do. But as I've played with it, I hate to say this, but Cakewalk Studio. Not even the professional one, but the cheapo, broken one that I pirated from my friend Ken a long time ago was more full-featured, had better everything other than possibly the sound fonts, and had all the functions that GarageBand has. In fact, it had more functions. And it was like, it cost like $50 or $60 back then, I think. It was almost nothing.
Yeah, you only pirated it because you're in high school.
Yeah.
If you had money in those days, you might have bought it.
And you know what? If I can find my old CD, because eventually I did buy it, and I used it at RIT, in fact, in my Windows box to compose music for music theory classes I took.
Well, can we say that GarageBand is better than Mario Paint music making?
Yes.
Okay.
And the thing is, GarageBand looks like it would be really great for when we go to conventions, because we can just record a podcast live, we can have all our sound effects live, we don't have to do much. It's really not good for doing the day-to-day podcast because there's so much functionality that's either left out, crippled, or it's there, but the way to do it requires much more effort than Audacity or Resound on a Linux box would.
Yep. One example that I noticed is, let's say if you want to cut a piece out of the podcast, just remove it. You have to click at the beginning of that piece, push a button, click at the end of that piece, push a button, click on the piece, push yet another button. It's actually not buttons. You have to go to the menu and click on something which doesn't have a shortcut. Drag something else and really kind of look at it with your squinty eyes to line it up, and then click two more things and push another button.
Now, I'll compare this right now to Resound and Audacity. Actually, I'll do it with Resound. Resound, for anyone because we've never heard of this, a lot of people haven't heard of Resound, is a lot like Cool Edit Pro was. And Cool Edit Pro was an awesome wave editor and a sequencer multi-track editor.
It is now Adobe Audition. It costs a lot of money.
It was a badass program. It was very, very cheap. The people who made it were awesome. And it was pretty much the industry standard in radio, which I didn't know until recently.
Yeah, just about every radio station in the country used Cool Edit.
And in fact, a lot of radio stations apparently still use it because they don't want to upgrade to Audition.
Yep.
Adobe bought the company that made Cool Edit.
A good business move.
And then they destroyed Cool Edit. And then they released a product that was almost as full-featured as Cool Edit called Adobe Audition. And they sell it for so much more money, it makes me want to cry.
Yeah, what did Cool Edit cost?
The generally full-featured version of Cool Edit that almost anyone would need was $250.
What does Audition cost?
God, I don't even know offhand. It's like $600 or $700, I think.
Really?
Don't quote me on that because I don't know offhand.
Someone's going to be like, Audition only costs blah, blah, blah. Well, you guys are blah.
And let me put it this way. The version of Cool Edit that I could do the whole podcast in cost about $70. And I could do a whole podcast in that just fine. But Resound is almost as good. And in Resound, if I want to delete a section of a podcast, I literally go click, click, delete. If I right-click on one side, I left-click on the other side, I've made my bounds, it automatically pegs the bounds to the borders in my wave. So it'll see if I click real close to the edge of me talking, it'll go right at the end of the talking before the noise gate clips in. And it just works. It automatically mixes a little bit between the two. It does everything for me, which is the kind of stuff I expected the Apple to do. But the Mac doesn't do it. The open source crap program that actually has a bunch of bugs in it does it better.
Yeah, we tried to, get something new and spend some money, $600 of money, to not have to live with these tiny little annoying bugs that were all over our open source program. Little do we know, we were trading little tiny bugs for giant fucking roadblocks.
These bugs don't have to be here. There's no reason Apple has to prevent me from making WAV and MP3 files other than their own self-interest. And, all right, I don't want to go on about GarageBand anymore. If anyone has any tips on how to make GarageBand not terrible, let me know.
Yeah, tell us how to not suck with GarageBand.
I'm really asking for your advice because I'm hoping that I'm just missing something. Or that there's a...
Yes, there is. I do have this 1% feeling because in the past, RIM has been subpar at figuring out how to use certain things.
Well, let me. I at least say this. When I first used Resound, I said, oh, this is crap. It's like Cool Edit, but it doesn't work the same way, and I had trouble with it. But after an hour of using it, I'd figured out all the little differences, and aside from the little cosmetic differences, it was the same basic program, and I could do everything I needed. When I used Audacity, after about 5 minutes, I was the master. I could do anything in Audacity.
Well, Audacity is a kind of a good interface, actually.
Yeah, I prefer Resound's interface.
Yeah?
But then again, Resound's a wave editor, and Audacity is a multi-track editor. They're sequencer. They're two different things. but GarageBand is just not intuitive. I mean, Resound is intuitive. If you know about audio, fiddling with it for an hour, you'll know everything there is to know about using Resound.
Okay. Adobe Audition 2.0 retail is $355 on Newegg.
That's a lot of money for something I could buy for $70.
Yep.
That does basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Adobe's added some stuff to it over the years, but I didn't need any of that.
Yeah. But as for Rym not learning software, I refer specifically to the FeedBurner incident where I was... Rym set up the FeedBurner account, and I was like, make the FeedBurner account do this, because he wouldn't let me do it, even though I know web stuff and he doesn't.
Even though I'd changed the password so he could just log into it.
Yeah, which I didn't, you didn't tell me that until
I did.
later.
Yeah, I think I did, and you forgot, or I told him.
Whatever, and then I was like, make it do this, and you were like, it can't do that, it can't do that, it can't do that. I went over to it, and he logged in, and I pointed, and I said, it's right there, you dumbass.
Yep.
There is this 1% chance I'm thinking that Rym might just not be doing the obvious thing with GarageBand.
However,
that is,
I point out that it is verified that it can't make all these file formats I want.
That is true. And it's also true that after me not using GarageBand, but searching on Google for help, wasn't able to find anything about that was detailed information beyond Apple's lame-ass help.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to talk more about GarageBand because I have a lot of issues with OS X as well.
Okay.
And I'm going to go over these real briefly. Point the first. Flash audio randomly just doesn't work, which is a problem I had in Linux. And I bought a Mac because Macs just work, but it doesn't.
That was
just
a problem I had when I was using Gen 2 and it was all crazy. Now that I'm using the Ubuntu, I don't have that problem anymore because I fixed all my ALSA audio.
So I searched around, and apparently a lot of OS X users are having this problem. And the solution that everyone gave me was run GarageBand and then close it, and that fixes it. And sure enough, it did, but what the hell?
Yeah, what kind of crazy problem is that?
I mean, keep in mind, I haven't done anything weird to this Mac. This is basically a straight from the Apple Store Mac.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't have a problem that glaring, especially on a Mac. I could see that on a Windows box or a Linux box.
Yeah, I've heard about problems this glaring on Macs before. Like, there was that famous, podcasting wubba 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 issue.
Oh, speaking of wubba wubba wubba, one of the big selling features of GarageBand is that it has auto ducking like the radio uses. Meaning, if I'm talking, or I'm playing, say, or opening music, as soon as I start talking, it'll duck the audio down underneath me. So you can hear what I'm saying, but the music's still playing. And when I stop talking, it comes back. And GarageBand does this automatically. It's this great thing. Not only does it really not work so well, like it doesn't sound good. It sounds all right, but it's not great. You can't really customize it to make it sound better.
Yeah, it's pretty much ducking or not ducking. Those are your choices.
And even the Apple documentation has been updated recently to say that many people find that they don't like the sound of our auto ducking, and we recommend that you do it manually. So they realize from all the feedback they've gotten that it sucks.
Now, see, here's the thing. If you want to wait for them to fix that, you're just going to be waiting and waiting and waiting. If you're using something open source, there would be a patch for that shit already.
Unless it's Audacity with that WXGTK bug.
That's right. Yeah, see, that's the thing is Linux bugs are crazy. It's like if you're using the NVIDIA driver with an Enforce 2 integrated graphics processor on this specific version of Ubuntu without dual-channel memory running in your computer, then you will get random freezing. It's crazy stuff like that. It's never something so obvious like this program has a bug that occurs all the time. Because people fix that shit right away.
Yep, unless it's like an unsupported program or someone's like beta pet project. But
yeah.
You're not going to be running
But all the
stuff.
major, the Firefoxes, the Audacities, the Ubuntus, the Gentus, the Linux kernel itself, all of those giant open source projects will never have an issue as big as the one with GarageBand's auto ducking. Ever.
All right. Now, to keep getting away from GarageBand, the biggest issue I've had in terms of the Mac itself. Now, the OS X is great, but I bought the low-end Mac Mini, the single core one.
The Intel Core Solo.
With 512 megabytes of RAM. Mm-hmm. It is massively faster than my Linux box. It encodes MP3s significantly slower than my Linux box. It mixes down to single track significantly slower than my Linux box. In general, it's slower than my Linux box.
Even if the software for those specific tasks was really inefficiently written, even if the software for those tasks is PPC software that has to go through Rosetta, Half-Life 1 on Wine on Linux, which is essentially the equivalent of a Rosetta type of thing, is better. It's like, what the...
I'm going to install Windows or Linux on this thing with Boot Camp just to see, but I have the sneaking suspicion that, well, I don't know, but it should be really fast if I do that.
Yeah, because remember when Gabe from Penny Arcade, he did Boot Camp on his Mac to run World of Warcraft in Windows and Mac. And Mac to compare.
I'm not editing that out.
We can't edit that burp out.
I can, but I'm not gonna. Because I can't put markers, God, GarageBand, in Audacity. Or
no,
not
Resound.
I could just click. I had a little Q button. So while we're recording, if Scott coughed, I could click and there'd be a little Q. And then
that means that when we're done with the show, Rym can look at the show and there'll be these little red lines wherever he clicked. So he could just look and go straight to where the burps are because there's little red lines on all of them.
Yep. Or I'll go in, why did I click there? Oh, because I coughed or my phone rang. Or all right, I got to go edit that out. Or we had a long pause because I dropped my microphone.
We can remember where the spots that need editing because he put little flags next to all of them.
There's really no way to do that in GarageBand.
No way at all.
The best I can do is drag pictures onto the special AAC podcast track.
Or we can just, like, whenever something weird happens, we can shut up for 10 seconds to leave a bunch of silence as a marker.
But then I still have
or
to
we can scream as a marker.
Or I could make a sound that would play or something. I could make a track that is sound effects that are silent and then hit those, thereby having markers. But that's really a hackish. I shouldn't have to do something that hackish on a Mac.
No, you shouldn't. It should be smooth and deadly.
But honestly, this computer is not fast enough for the software it has. It slows. If I run GarageBand, everything else slows to a crawl. If I open a whole bunch of tabs, it slows down more than my Linux box does when I open a bunch of tabs in Firefox.
Yeah, it's like the way they seem to be marketing these things is the Core Solo is sufficient. Get the Core Duo if you want to be wicked fast, crazy wicked fast. They didn't say, yeah, the Core Duo is pretty much what you need to go at a decent speed, and the Core Solo is just kind of if you're cheap.
Yep, and after I looked around online, everyone said you have to have at least a gig of RAM or GarageBand is crap and everything's crap. And you know what? An extra gig of RAM is $100.
Yep.
That immediately is not worth it, and I wouldn't.
Well, at least if you buy it from Apple.
Yeah, but if you don't buy it from Apple, it voids your warranty and all sorts of crap, and you got to get the special Mac RAM and stick it in there. And I got to figure out how to open this thing, which is really sleek. I like the physical case, but I don't feel comfortable tearing it open.
Yeah, you can go online. There's some pictures of people opening it.
Yeah, I don't want to void the warranty, especially if I might return it.
Yeah, of course. Personally, I did I added a wire to my car to do iPod integration via a wire instead of an FM transmitter, and now I'm completely fearless in just ripping apart my dashboard.
Yeah,
it's just plastic and it just rips right off. It's great.
Now, I've also had a lot of weird random issues. Like, I'll be using my computer with GarageBand and stuff open, and suddenly my dock will stop magnifying, and I can't make it do it again until I reboot.
Whoa.
I shouldn't have to reboot. And I'm up to date. I went to the little OS X updater and updated everything as far as it could update.
Mm-hmm.
And just little things like that. Little problems that I guess I was under the impression that Macs didn't have because they were so streamlined and polished, and that they were problems in Linux because Linux is kind of tough to make work. But I'm having more problems with my Mac than I do with my Linux box. Except for iPod iTunes, which works perfectly.
Yep.
And actually chatting with ADM is really, really good.
Yeah, I like the way ADM makes the chat boxes with the colors of the different people.
Yeah, and Skype works fantastically. I haven't used iChat much yet, but it looks really, really cool. In fact, we're most likely going to be interviewing Jim Vowles, the CEO, well, the head, the con-chair of Otakon, this Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Which we won't have that episode until next Wednesday, most likely.
No, we're not going to do it this Wednesday?
I don't really want to...
I think we should do it right away. We can save our anime next. No one cares as much as Jim Fowles.
You know why I'm not going to do that? Because then I have to edit it that night in GarageBand. Or export it to my Linux box and do it. Seriously, the biggest thing I can say is that I really keep having this urge to just turn on my Linux box and do the podcast. Because I'll be able to just crank out a podcast with the same quality you guys are used to, which I don't know how today's will sound, but listen to all our previous episodes, and we have good quality.
Yeah, I want everyone to go out there, take this episode and take last Monday's episode and compare and listen to both of them. And, listen to like something that's exactly the same, like the opening and the closing, because it's the same audio, and tell us which one is better.
Now, I'll point out that in terms of the special filters that GarageBand has built in, I looked at what they are, and I could just recreate those on my own for free in Resound.
Why don't we?
I'm thinking of doing that.
That's a good idea.
But, I mean, I like my Apple, and if I weren't a podcaster, I'd love my Apple. And it's weird to me that podcasting is the one thing I can't do on my Apple computer.
Yeah, so all you podcasters out there, because I know a shit ton of podcasters do use GarageBand. You know?
How are you doing? Do you just deal with all that?
Do you not know that there are easier and better ways to do all these things, and you're just, Apple hose or what?
I mean, I don't want to disparage Macs because I really like this machine, but I'm really uncomfortable with Apple now that they're trying to force me to use their proprietary formats, and that I really feel that the processing power and abilities of the Mac Mini were grossly overstated by Apple.
Yep. I'm really just getting the feeling that a lot of the podcasters out there just don't know anything about audio, have never used a real audio wave editing program before, so they don't know what they're missing, and they don't realize they've got complete shit, and that their lives are being made miserable, and that their editing times could be reduced to mere minutes as opposed to the hours that they're spending.
Please tell me I'm wrong. Tell us there's something we don't know.
Yes. I really want to know, because then we could use this thing and be all good.
If any of you live nearby, anywhere in downstate New York, I wouldn't be opposed if you're the GarageBand master. Come over to our house. We'll do a show in GarageBand, and then you show us how to do it. And then we'll do a show in Audacity and Resound, and we'll show you how we do it.
Or at the least, I know that some of our listeners are podcasters who use GarageBand. We'll set up a time in Skype or iChat with you, and we can discuss, and you can teach us stuff.
We'll also record it and put it on the show.
Yeah, maybe, depending on how good it is.
Please tell me I'm wrong. I like my Mac, and we'll probably end up keeping it anyway, because GarageBand seems to be really good for doing a live show at a convention, mostly just because the Mac is really small and portable.
Mm-hmm. And at a convention, you're not going to be editing and cutting and pasting.
Nope. I mean, when we record a show at a convention, we don't edit it at all. We
just push record, we wait, and we push stop, which is GarageBand perfect. That's what they want you to do.
Yep.
One last thing is that the Mac Mini seems to be billed as the plug it into your TV living room computer.
It doesn't do that by default. You have to buy a dongle.
You have to buy a dongle to plug it into the TV.
No,
it comes with a remote control that would be perfect with the front.
All right, you may be wondering what that abrupt cutoff was.
Followed by a slight pause, which we left in to make you comfortable.
I pretty much just had it with Apple because GarageBand decided just then that because I was out of RAM, and I looked, it had used up all of my RAM.
Absolutely, more than we had RAM than we had. It was swapping a little bit.
It refused to continue recording. It just stopped. It didn't even give an error or a warning or a flashing red thing or anything.
Don't people know how to write software these days? If I wrote a program to record lots and lots of audio, I would keep maybe the latest, I don't know, minute or two of audio in RAM and have all the old audio written to the disk
or in the very
while
least,
I'm recording.
In the very least, just have a thing that says you can't record longer than this, or have a thing that says you're about to run out, or you can't record anymore, or warning, I'm not recording anymore. It just stopped. The only reason we noticed it is because I happened to look up at the computer and see that it had just stopped recording suddenly.
If we hadn't looked at the Apple, we could have gone for a whole lot longer talking and none of it would have been recorded and we would have been pissed. Real pissed.
Yeah, and all right, so I'm recording on my Linux box now.
And right at this moment, the Apple is exporting the part of the show that you just listened to an AIFF file.
Now,
and it's taking ludicrously large amounts of time.
It's taking longer to do that on the super fast Mac than it
Relatively super fast Mac.
Super fast compared to my other computer.
That's what I'm saying.
Than my Linux computer takes to do something more complex.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently I can only ever record 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 23 seconds of mono wave audio on GarageBand without spending $100 to get more RAM.
Or buy a Core Duo processor, I guess.
Now I want to point this out too. On my Linux box, has the same amount of RAM as this Mac, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a lot slower. I've recorded almost 900 megabytes in one go, and the Linux box didn't even hiccup.
I think that from a computer science perspective, that has a lot to do with the way the operating system manages memory and the way the specific audio program itself is coded, which means the reason we bought the Apple is for the GarageBand software and the operating system. And those are the two factors here, both of which are negative.
We might end up keeping the Mac to do live shows, even though now...
And be the living room PC.
Even though now, if we do a live show that lasts longer than an hour, we're then going to have to stop recording, export to AIF for like 15 minutes, and entertain the crowd during that time before we can record again.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sure we should do that, though, on purpose, to be like, hey, crowd, this is why you shouldn't podcast with Apple. It's more expensive, and it's easier if you don't know what you're doing or if you plan on doing something short. But if you plan on doing anything real, Windows, and possibly something proprietary that costs money.
So at least for now, regardless of whether we keep the Mac or not, we're keeping it at least till Wednesday because we're interviewing someone over iChat, and things like that might be reason enough to keep the Mac.
And that interview shouldn't go more than an hour.
Yeah. Of course, I've heard people have had a lot of trouble making iChat record properly in GarageBand, so I gotta test.
Supposedly, you just click a button.
Yeah,
and it works.
I gotta test that tomorrow.
Well, we'll find out.
But yeah, as of now, today was the first, last, and only regular Geeknights episode that will be recorded in GarageBand. It just can't.
Unless on the incredible off chance that someone comes to us and enlightens us in the ways of the band of garage.
And I'll say right now.
Or as the Brits say, the garage.
The answer to my current issue is not buy more RAM. Because more RAM costs $100, which means this computer now costs $700.
For $700, we could have bought a PC with gigs and gigs and gigs of RAM that would have run Ubuntu Dapper Drake. Ubuntu Dapper Drake like a freaking beast. Oh, it finally exported to iTunes.
Yeah, all right. So now I've got to get all of these files off of my Mac onto my Linux box and Scott's Windows laptop so we can convert them to formats that you all can actually listen to as opposed to Apple proprietary cruft.
Yep.
Really, I implore you, tell us we're wrong. You're not going to hear any more GarageBand episodes except possibly interviews with people over Skype and iTunes or iChat. And possibly live convention shows.
Or possibly short tidbits when we're real lazy and don't care.
Yeah. All right, we're done now. We've done a long episode, and I'm actually really angry at my Mac right now for the fact that I have to stay up for another hour or two to do all this stuff just to put a podcast up.
Well, for once, I have to stay up also because I have to convert the damn whatnots.
Yeah, and while he's converting, I'll be doing other things.
Yep.
But you know what? Just now, I've realized I'm using my Linux box again, and it's so much slicker at doing a podcast. It's so much easier. It's so much quicker. I'm sorry to all of you who wanted me to use a Mac. I really wanted to. I really like the Mac, but GarageBand is, as far as I'm concerned, crap.
Yeah. I'll try. I gotta try it once, possibly this week, just to make sure Rym isn't smoking some drugs.
Yeah,
but I just saw it stop recording.
Yeah,
and that's all. There's no doubt.
All right, we're done tonight. Hopefully, we'll be less angry tomorrow. Well, we will be because I'll be recording in my Linux box, which is easy.
And we'll be talking about some games.
Yep. And that was Geeknights with Rym and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geeknights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night. Said that we were better.
And then their forum exploded.
And their forum exploded a little tiny. It wasn't a big explosion. It was a little tiny explosion.
It was a podcastosphere explosion.
Yeah, and then I went over there and I was like, I never listened to your show. And, well, I listen to it now, but at the time I hadn't listened to the show. And I'm like, we don't necessarily hate you, whatever. Then they're like, yeah, we suck. So they admitted that their podcast sucks. And then they were like, we should have a war. I'm like, all right.
I guess we'll fire an opening salvo out. You suck.
The Moon Masters is the worst podcast this side of the universe. It's two schmucks with bad audio quality.
I heard. I can't say where I heard this. It might just be a rumor, but I heard that the two Moon Masters can't get it up.
Ah.
And that they killed their parents.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard that since they live on the West Coast, everything is smaller over there.
Okay, I feel like Shock Jock Radio right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do some news action.
Yeah. All right. So actually, we've been talking not really as news, but just as asides very often about HD, DVD, and Blu-ray. And anyone who's listened for a while knows our opinions on those two bits of technology. But very recently, Blu-ray finally debuted in the point that now there are players available and people have watched Blu-ray movies.
Holy crap.
And
and for feedback, so that you can tell us stuff, and then we might talk about it on the show, or we'll probably I responded to like almost every email we get because we don't get too many yet.
And speaking of feedback, let us know how the audio sounds, especially today and in the coming few days, because for those of you who do frequent the forums, I bought a Mac Mini.
And that's what we're going to talk about today, so hold off.
Yep, but I'll say right now that we're currently using GarageBand for the first time to record a podcast, as opposed to our previous Linux box running Resound, Audacity, Lame, and ID3V2.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot to say about that.
Well, we'll say that all soon.
Yep.
First, I want to talk about something that happened recently in the forum that not everyone might be aware of.
Yep, which I find this kind of hilarious.
I find it also hilarious. So apparently, let's start at the beginning. There's a guy named Thade who has a podcast that I was on once, and he's in our forum, and he likes our show.
Yep.
His show's okay. Haha. Lol.
Elmo.
Elmo. And he posted a thing in our forum saying, "This other podcast is number 1 on Libsyn, and you're better than them. What the hell?"
Now, part of that is that we've, until just now, never advertised Geeknights.
Never.
We've spread only through word of mouth, and we're gearing up over these next many weeks toward Otakon, which is our, I guess, big coming out. That's going to be our huge, crazy live show in Baltimore, Maryland at the biggest anime con.
We're going to do some real big promotion real soon, so we're going to get, hopefully, a crap ton of listeners coming in.
Even though we see y'all kind of trickling in now.
Yep. So that means it must be working.
But anyway, a lot of our current listeners are always yelling at us to get more listeners, or why don't you advertise, and how come people don't talk about you everywhere?
I wonder. But the point is that that other podcast is called The Moon Masters, which I listened to one episode, well, part of an episode, and it's just two guys talking about nothing. Like, we're two guys talking about stuff, geeky stuff. They're two guys talking about nothing.
So it's about the Seinfeld of podcasting?
I guess. I don't even know.
Yeah, I haven't listened to it. I have no opinion either way.
Yep, and basically, they got to number 1 on Libsyn by cheating, and they freely admit this. They did some sort of FARC image thing.
It's a good way to cheat. I really give them props.
Yep.
I looked at what they did, and that was clever.
Yep, and Libsyn found out and stopped them, and whatever. So, first of all, they didn't even beat us on, well, they might. We have no idea where we are on Libsyn.
Yeah.
We're probably way down low because we don't use all that Libsyn stuff.
Yeah, Libsyn's always yelling at me to, hey, update your RSS blah, 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 but we don't use any of their features except their file storage.
Yep.
And we never plan to.
No, we don't. So apparently, like, someone on our forum was on their forum also and pointed to the thing where the Thade guy... It's Monday, June 19th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight, we discuss switching to Mac and GarageBand. Let's do this.
Well, we're back from yet another con weekend.
Oh, and what a one-day con it was, at least for us.
Yeah, it was weird, though, going to a con where we're not staff or we're not panelists or we were nothing special. We were just a bunch of guys.
Yeah, it's like I could tell that it was a good con and there was lots of happening stuff. Not maybe what I expected to be happening, but good stuff. But for us personally, since we didn't know anyone there, it was kind of weird at times, trying to look for something to do.
Yeah, I mean, usually when I go to a con, I'm either like hanging around being security or I'm hanging around with my giant crew making fun of punk kids or something. But here it was just us and Katsu.
Yep, well, we'll talk about that more on Wednesday.
Yeah, when we actually cover it.
Yep. Well, we noticed there's a lot of new listeners, so all this week. We're going to do like a 30-second little tiny bit at the beginning of the show to help all the new listeners out. Hello, new listeners.
We figure most of you are from all the conventions we've been to lately.
Yep.
At least that's our guess. If anyone's here for some other weird reason, let us know.
Yeah, let us know how you got here. Well, first off, I'm Scott.
And I'm Rym.
So don't get confused with who is who.
Yeah, we had a listener once who was like, Rym, stop being so mean to Scott, which was kind of weird because usually it's the other way around.
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Second of all, we do 4 shows a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday is Science and Technology. That's today. Tuesday night is games of all sorts. Wednesday is anime, manga, and comics. And Thursday is crazy.
Yeah, usually us yelling about things, ranting about things, raving sometimes.
Yep. So if you are downloading the show manually and are not yet into the hip, cool podcasting subscription scene, we have 5 different feeds. One feed will get you every single episode we do. And there are separate feeds for each day, because a lot of people only want to listen to Tuesday or only want to listen to Thursday.
Yeah, your best bet is either look for them, whatever pod-catching thing you use or podcast directory, or just go to our website. They're all listed.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you a tutorial on how to do this because you can just search on Google for podcasting how-tos, and it will tell you everything you need to know. iTunes is probably the easiest way. And,
of course, if you go to the website, we have forums, we have a Frapper map.
Yep, so go to www.frontrowcrew.com, and all our cool stuffs are there for you to do.
Also, our archive of, 130 episodes or so.
Something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but make sure, especially the forums, and email us, geeknights@frontrowcrew.com.